deep inside the National Library of Sweden in the city of Stockholm, there's a book that has fascinated historians, scientists, and curious readers for centuries. This book is known as the Codex Gigas, which many people call the Devil's Bible. It is not just an ordinary old book. In fact, it is one of the most mysterious manuscripts ever created during the Middle Ages. The Codex Gigas is famous because of its enormous size, its strange illustration of the devil, and the strange legend about how it was written. For more than 800 years, people have wondered how this giant book was created and why it contains such unusual material. The first thing that surprises anyone who sees the Codex Gigas is its size. The book is almost 3 feet tall and about 20 inches wide. It weighs around 75 kilograms, which is about 165 pounds. That means the book is heavier than many adults. Because of its size, it usually takes 2 people to lift it safely. The pages are also huge compared to normal books. Each page is made from animal skin, which was common for manuscripts during medieval times. Experts believe that the skins of around 160 animals were used to create the parchment for this book. Preparing this much parchment would have taken a very long time and required a great amount of effort. The manuscript contains hundreds of pages filled with text, drawings, and decorations. Originally, the book had about 320 leaves, which means around 640 pages. However, some of these pages disappeared at some point in history. Today, only about 310 leaves remain. The missing pages are one of the many mysteries surrounding the Codex Gigas. No one knows exactly when these pages were removed or what information they once contained. Some historians believe they might have included special religious rules or important monastery documents, while others think they may have contained information that later readers wanted to hide. The Codex Gigas was created in the early 13th century in a small monastery in what is now the Czech Republic. At that time, the area was known as Bohemia, a historical region in Central Europe. The monastery where the book was written was called Podlasis Monastery. This monastery was not very large or wealthy. Because of this, historians have always been surprised that such a massive and complex manuscript could have been created there. Producing a book of this size required not only time, but also expensive materials and skilled work. For a small monastery to complete such a project would have been extremely difficult. According to legend, the Codex Gigas was written by a single monk who had committed a serious crime against the monastery. The story says that the monk broke his sacred vows, although the exact details of his crime are unknown. As punishment, the monks decided that he would be executed in a very cruel way. They planned to seal him inside a wall and leave him there to die. In medieval times, punishments like this were sometimes used to deal with people who had broken religious laws. The monk, desperate to save his life, begged for another chance. He promised the monks that he would create a book unlike anything the world had ever seen. This book would contain all the knowledge known at that time, including religious texts, history, medicine, and many other subjects. The monk claimed he could finish the book in just one night. The other monks knew that such a task would normally take many years, but they agreed to give him a chance. As the legend continues, the monks soon realized that it was impossible for him to finish such a huge book by himself before morning. In fear and desperation, he prayed for help, but according to the story, he did not pray to God. Instead, he called upon the devil. The legend says that the devil agreed to help the monk complete the manuscript in exchange for his soul. To honor this dark deal, the monk supposedly included a large portrait of the devil inside the book. Whether this story is true or not, historians still debate today. However, the presence of the famous devil illustration inside the Codex Gigas has kept the legend alive for centuries. Many people believe that the mysterious history of the book, combined with its unusual artwork and massive size, is what made it one of the most fascinating manuscripts in the world. One of the most fascinating things about the Codex Gigas is not only its size, but also the incredible amount of information it contains. Unlike many medieval books that focus on a single subject, this manuscript includes a wide variety of texts covering religion, history, medicine, and practical knowledge. Because of this, some historians describe it as a kind of medieval encyclopedia. The person who created it clearly wanted the book to be a complete collection of important knowledge available during that time. The largest part of the Codex Gigas is dedicated to the Christian Bible. It contains a full Latin version of the Bible known as the Vulgate. This translation was created by the early Christian scholar Jerome in the 4th century and became the standard version of the Bible used by the Western Church during the Middle Ages. In the Codex Gigas, the Old Testament appears near the beginning of the manuscript, while the New Testament appears much later in the book. This unusual arrangement has puzzled some researchers because it is not the typical order used in most medieval Bibles. Between these sections of the Bible, the manuscript includes many other important texts. One of them is the work of the Jewish historian Flavius Josephus. Josephus lived in the 1st century and wrote detailed histories about ancient Jewish society and the Roman Empire. His books are extremely valuable to historians because they describe events and cultures that are not always mentioned in other historical sources. Including these writings in the Codex Gigas shows that the creator of the manuscript wanted to preserve not only religious knowledge, but also historical information. Another important work included in the manuscript is the encyclopedia written by Isidore Seville. His famous book, called Etymology, was one of the most influential texts of the Middle Ages. It attempted to organize and explain almost all the knowledge people had at that time. It discussed topics such as language, science, medicine, animal geography, and philosophy. For medieval scholars, this book was an essential guide to understanding the world. Its presence in the Codex Gigas shows that the manuscript was designed to serve as a comprehensive source of learning. The manuscript also contains a historical chronicle known as the Chronica Bohemorum, written by the medieval writer Cosmas of Prague. This text records the early history of the region of Bohemia, which is now part of the Czech Republic. Chronicles like this were very important in medieval times because they preserved stories about kings, battles, and important events that shaped a region's identity. By including this chronicle, the Codex Gigas also serve as a record of local history. Another surprising feature of the manuscript is its collection of medical writings. Several sections include medical advice based on the teachings of famous ancient physicians, such as Hippocrates and Galen. These medical texts describe how to diagnose illnesses, study a patient's pulse, and examine urine to understand different diseases. During the Middle Ages, medicine was closely connected with religious beliefs, so it was not unusual for monks to study health and healing along with spiritual matters. Monasteries often served as early centers of learning where monks copied and preserved important scientific and medical works. In addition to these scholarly texts, the Codex Gigas also contains a calendar of important religious feast days. This calendar lists special dates dedicated to saints and religious celebrations. Such calendars were commonly included in medieval manuscripts because they helped monks organize their daily prayers and ceremonies throughout the year. The manuscript even includes a necrology, which is a list of people who had died. Monks would use this list to remember and pray for the souls of those individuals. However, not everything in the Codex Gigas is purely religious or scholarly. Some sections include exorcism formulas and prayers intended to protect people from evil spirits or disease. During the Middle Ages, people believed that illnesses or strange events could sometimes be caused by supernatural forces. Because of this belief, prayers and rituals were often used to drive away harmful spirits. These practices were considered part of religious life rather than magic, and many monasteries kept such instructions in their manuscripts. This mixture of sacred scripture, historical texts, medical knowledge, and spiritual rituals makes the Codex Gigas truly unique. It reflects how people in medieval Europe understood the world. Religion, science, and everyday life were closely connected, and scholars try to gather all useful knowledge in one place. The Codex Gigas appears to have been created with exactly this purpose in mind. Yet even with all this information, one feature of the manuscript has captured the imagination of readers more than anything else. Hidden among its many pages is a large and striking illustration of the devil himself. This image, which is unlike anything seen in most other medieval books, is one of the main reasons why the Codex Gigas became known as the Devil's Bible. Among all the strange and fascinating features of the Codex Gigas, nothing has attracted more attention than a large and unusual illustration of the devil that appears inside the manuscript. This single image is the main reason why the book later became known as the Devil's Bible. For centuries, this mysterious picture has made readers wonder why a religious manuscript created by a monk would include such a powerful and frightening image of Satan. The illustration appears on a full page of the manuscript and is one of the largest images found in any medieval book. The devil is drawn sitting in a strange and unnatural position, facing directly toward the viewer. His body is covered in dark colors, and his face has a frightening expression. 2 large red horns grow from his head, and his eyes stare directly outward from the page. His hands and feet have long claws, and his mouth is open in a way that makes the figure look both powerful and terrifying. The artist who created the image clearly wanted it to leave a strong impression on anyone who looked at it. Another unusual detail about this image is the empty space around it. In many medieval manuscripts, images were surrounded by decorative designs, text, or other drawings. But in this case, the devil stands almost alone on the page with very little surrounding decoration. This large empty background draws the viewer's attention directly toward the figure itself. Because of this design choice, the image feels even more dramatic, and unsettling on the page directly opposite the devil's portrait is another large illustration. This one shows the heavenly city of Jerusalem, which is described in the final book of the Bible, the book of Revelation. The city is shown as a beautiful and ordered place with strong walls and towers. By placing these 2 images next to each other, the creator of the manuscript created a powerful contrast. On one side is the symbol of heaven and divine order, and on the other side is the frightening image of the devil. Many historians believe this was meant to represent the struggle between good and evil that is often described in Christian teachings. The presence of the devil's image in such a large and important manuscript has led to many theories. Some researchers believe the illustration was included as a warning. During the Middle Ages, religious art often showed images of demons or Satan to remind believers of the dangers of sin and temptation. By seeing such a frightening image, readers might have been encouraged to live better lives and avoid actions that could lead them away from their faith. However, other scholars believe there may have been a deeper symbolic meaning behind the illustration. The Codex Gigas contains both sacred and practical knowledge, including religious texts, historical records, and medical writings. Some experts think the devil's portrait may have been included to represent the idea that knowledge itself can be used for either good or evil. In other words, the book may have been showing that human beings must choose how they use the knowledge they possess. The strange legend surrounding the creation of the Codex Gigas also adds to the mystery of the devil's portrait. According to the story, the monk who wrote the manuscript made a deal with the devil in order to complete the book in a single night. The portrait, according to the legend, was included as a tribute to the devil who supposedly helped create the manuscript. Most historians today believe the story is simply a legend that developed long after the book was written. Still, the dramatic nature of the story has helped keep the mystery alive. Modern scientific studies of the Codex Gigas have revealed something interesting about the handwriting in the manuscript. Experts who examined the text found that the entire book appears to have been written by a single person. The style of the letters remains remarkably consistent throughout hundreds of pages. This suggests that one scribe was responsible for copying the entire manuscript. However, historians also believe that completing such a large book would have taken many years of careful work rather than a single night. Even though scholars have learned a great deal about the Codex Gigas, many questions still remain unanswered. No one knows exactly why the devil's portrait was made so large, or why it was placed so prominently in the manuscript. The missing pages of the book also add to the mystery, as they may have once contained important information that could explain the creator's intentions. Because of these unanswered questions, the Codex Gigas continues to capture the imagination of people around the world. The powerful image of the devil, combined with the strange legend about the book's creation, has turned the manuscript into one of the most mysterious and talked about historical books ever discovered. Another major mystery surrounding the Codex Gigas involves the pages that disappeared from a manuscript. When historians carefully studied the structure of the book, they discovered that several pages were removed at some point in its long history. Originally, the Codex Gigas contained about 320 leaves, which means the book once had around 640 pages. Today, however, only about 310 leaves remain. This means that at least 12 leaves, or 24 pages, were deliberately cut out of the manuscript. What makes this discovery even more mysterious is the way those pages were removed. The missing leaves were not torn out accidentally or destroyed by fire. Instead, they appear to have been carefully cut away using a sharp blade. This suggests that someone intentionally removed them. Because of this, Historians have spent many years trying to understand what those missing pages might have contained, and why some would want to remove them from such an important manuscript. Point one theory suggests that the missing pages may have contained a set of monastic rules. Many monasteries followed a guide for daily life known as the Rule of Saint Benedict, written by the early Christian leader Benedict of Nursia. These rules explain how monks should live, pray, work, and behave inside a monastery. Some researchers believe that the Codex Gigas may originally have included this rule, but later readers removed it because they already had other copies, or because the text was no longer needed in that particular book. Another theory suggests that the missing pages may have contained illustrations or decorations that were considered valuable. During difficult times in history, people sometimes removed artwork from manuscripts and sold it in order to make money. Medieval illuminated pages could be extremely valuable because of the gold leaf and detailed painting used in their creation. If the Codex Gigas once contained such artwork, someone may have removed the pages in order to sell them. There is also a more mysterious theory. Some people believe the missing pages may have contained information that later readers considered dangerous or controversial. Because the manuscript already contains exorcism formulas and unusual material, some historians have wondered whether the removed pages included additional texts related to magic, rituals, or other practices that church authorities later wanted to hide. However, there is no direct evidence proving this idea, so it remains only speculation. The long journey of the Codex Gigas through history has also added to its mysterious reputation. The manuscript was first created in the small Podlazes monastery in the region of Bohemia, which is now part of the Czech Republic. However, the monastery was later destroyed during the violent religious conflicts known as the Hussite Wars in the early 15th century. Many buildings in the region were burned, and many people lost their lives during these conflicts. Fortunately, the Codex Gigas had already been moved to another monastery before the destruction occurred. It was transferred to the monastery of Brumov for safekeeping. Because of this move, the manuscript survived while its original home was destroyed. If the book had remained at Podlazes, it might have been lost forever during the wars. Several centuries later, the manuscript attracted the attention of a powerful ruler, the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II. Rudolf lived in the late 16th century and was famous for his strong interest in science, art, and unusual subjects such as astrology and alchemy. He collected many rare books and objects that he believed contained hidden knowledge. Because of this interest, the Codex Gigas eventually became part of his famous collection in the city of Prague. The story of the manuscript took another dramatic turn during the great European conflict known as the 30 Years' War. In 1648, near the end of the war, Swedish forces captured Prague and took many valuable objects from the city as war prizes. Among these treasures was the Codex Gigas. The manuscript was transported north to Sweden, where it eventually became part of the Royal Library. Today, the Codex Gigas is carefully preserved in the National Library of Sweden in the city of Stockholm. Because of its age and historical importance, the book is kept under special conditions that protect it from damage. Visitors can sometimes see the manuscript displayed behind glass, but it is handled only by experts who work to preserve it for future generations. Even after centuries of study, the Codex Gigas continues to raise questions. Why were its pages removed? Why does it contain such a striking image of the devil? And why did a small medieval monastery create such an enormous and complex book? These mysteries are part of the reason why the manuscript remains one of the most fascinating historical books ever created. Over the centuries, the strange history of the Codex Gigas has led many people to believe that the manuscript might be cursed. While historians usually explain events with logical reasons, legends and mysterious stories have grown around the book as it traveled across Europe. These stories are one of the reasons why the Codex Gigas is often surrounded by an atmosphere of fear and fascination. One of the earliest dramatic events connected to manuscript happened during the religious conflicts that shook the region of Bohemia in the early 15th century. These conflicts were known as the Hussite Wars. During this violent period, many monasteries and churches were attacked or destroyed. The original home of the Codex Gigas, the Podlazes Monastery, was burned to the ground. Many of the monks who lived there were killed, and the buildings were completely ruined. Some people later claimed that this destruction was connected to the mysterious nature of the manuscript. Although historians believe it was simply part of the widespread violence of time, the The Codex Gigas survived only because it had already been moved to another monastery for protection. It was transferred to the Benedictine monastery of Brumov, where it remained safe for many years. Even so, the story of its original home being destroyed helped strengthen the belief that strange events followed the book. Another chapter in the manuscript's long history began when the powerful ruler Rudolph II became interested in it. Rudolph II was a Holy Roman Emperor during the late 16th and early 17th centuries. He lived in the city of Prague and was known for collecting unusual objects, rare books, and mysterious artifacts. Rudolph was fascinated by subjects such as astrology, alchemy, and hidden knowledge. Because of this interest, he gathered many strange and valuable items in his royal collection. The Codex Gigas eventually became part of Rudolph's library. Some stories claim that the emperor spent long hours studying the book, hoping to discover secrets hidden in its pages. According to certain legends, his obsession with mysterious knowledge may have contributed to the mental struggles he experienced later in life. However, historians point out that rulers in those times often faced political pressures and health problems that could also explain his difficulties. Another dramatic moment in the history of the Codex Gigas occurred during the great European conflict known as the 30 Years' War. This war lasted from 1618 to 1648 and involved many nations across Europe. Near the end of the conflict, Swedish forces entered Prague and captured the city. As was common during wars of that period, the soldiers took valuable objects from the royal collections as trophies. Among the items taken from Prague was the Codex Gigas. The enormous manuscript was transported north to Sweden along with many other rare books and treasures. From that moment on, the Devil's Bible became part of Sweden's cultural heritage. Today, it is kept in the National Library of Sweden in the city of Stockholm. One of the most famous events connected to the manuscript occurred in 1697. During that year, a devastating fire broke out in the royal castle in Stockholm, where the library collection was stored. The flames spread quickly and destroyed thousands of valuable books and documents. As the fire grew stronger, people rushed to save as many manuscripts as possible. Because the Codex Gigas was extremely heavy, carrying it down narrow stairways would have taken too much time. According to historical reports, someone decided to throw the giant manuscript out a window in order to save it from flames. The book crashed to the ground below, but survived the fall. Although the story says that a person standing below was injured by the falling manuscript, the important fact is that the Codex Gigas escaped the destruction that claimed many other priceless documents. This dramatic survival added even more mystery to the book's reputation. Over time, stories began to spread that the manuscript somehow protected itself or that it was meant to survive through history for a special reason. Of course, historians